What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Clean Energy Edge, where we talk about real world energy transition, not fantasy projections. I'm Russ Bates, and I'm here with my co host from Canada, Brian Scott. Brian, what's shaking?
Oh, just another day in the Great White North.
Yeah, I hear you. Same here. So let's jump into it. This is going to be an interesting conversation. So today we're going to talk about something that I'm hearing a lot about, and I think a lot of people get the headlines and they think it's right here. It's technology that's available. And is that true? And that's small modular reactors, or SMRs. So let's kind of level set here with them, Brian. SMRs, they're still nuclear, right? They still use uranium fuel, these coolants. The only difference is they're smaller, they're modular, and they're meant to be built in really factories instead of on-site mega projects. And I want to be clear about my stance with nuclear. So I believe nuclear works. It obviously does. The reactors that are online today, they do produce a lot of electricity, and it is really carbon free, right?
Yep.
So that's cool, but there's issues. There's some major issues that I see. And I'm just caveating this whole conversation: the high cost, the long timelines for actually building these projects. You still have that radioactive waste, right? And the other thing is there's real security risks, terrorism, accidents, that type of thing.
Yep.
So kind of what we want to break down in this conversation is, with SMRs, are they a new solution, or is it just nuclear repackaged and kind of rebranded?
Yeah.
Also,
I think, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here.
Yeah. Another thing is, will they be commercially viable anytime soon? And then do the economics hold up, especially when we compare them to the clean energy of solar, wind, storage? So yeah, let's jump into that, and let's kind of let them know. I mean, what's it supposed to solve? An SMR it's typically going to be in that 50 to 300 megawatt range is what we've been hearing for SMRs. The advantage they talk about is that modular construction that we've mentioned. They're supposed to be a little bit on the passive safety side for easier siting, and a solution for data centers, some remote grids, military, that makes sense, and industrial uses. And again, 24/7 clean baseload power. So that's great, but I mean, Brian, kind of going back to that first point I made, are SMRs really a new solution, or is it just a smaller nuclear plant, really?
I think the pitch onto its own makes sense. I think nuclear makes sense in a lot of ways. It really does. There's lots of it up here in Canada. I think the problem with the pitch itself is it's so reliant on this modular construction, this factory-built construction, and it's kind of a chicken and egg problem, right? You need so much demand for these things to create the factory to get the savings. So we're kind of at an R&D stage, right? Like they're building some in Ontario right now. The first one is supposed to be active online, powering homes late 2029. If I had to guess, we're probably at least 2 or 3 years past that, just because the nature of nuclear, the way it's always gone, schedules just don't seem to be real. And I think that's something when we're talking about a long-term project and the end date isn't realistic, it's just something that has to be factored, right? I don't think there's going to be cost savings anytime soon on these because of the whole chicken and egg nature of the problem. But that doesn't mean nuclear isn't good, and maybe this should be looked at. I don't really have a problem with it from that perspective. I just think it's kind of has the classic kind of oversell of, oh, these are going to be cheap, they're going to be easy, we're going to build them in factories, in a few years you're going to see them. It's just they're not there, and the economics of the situation that are required to fix the economics, if you know what I mean. You need the demand to create the economics. How do you do that unless you have some sort of nation building project where a country the scale of the US says, okay, we're going to do tons of this? and implements it, I think that would increase it, exponentially as far as speed goes. But there's still a lot of challenges. A lot of challenges. We've seen, I mean, the stories we've seen in nuclear in the last uh, 10 to 20 years in the US of projects going way over budget, way over schedule. Is it South Carolina where they basically got halfway there and then just called it off and buried them, spending billions of dollars? Like it's kind of hard to believe.
The Project Vogel in Georgia, that one was finished, I guess, is a year ago, 2 years ago. I'd have to look, but it was recently completed. And it was way over budget. It was way over on schedule. It just nuclear is just a tough thing to do because, again, it's not like installing solar where all right, if you drop one, don't worry about it. Nuclear, everything has to be exactly right, and it has to be that way for a reason. It takes so much to get these things built. But once they're built, I mean, they do produce. That's great. But as far as where we're at, I mean, this is 2025, right? So let's talk about where things stand today, because I had a conversation. We were talking, before we came on here, about a colleague who works with folks in data centers, and he said they're speccing SMRs for data centers, and apparently saying they're going to be built, and you're going to start seeing them in 2 years. I don't think that's got any hope. I know you were saying 2029 for the one that's already moving in Canada. So in the US, there's no commercial SMRs that are operating. There's a few. There was one, NuScale. It was approved. It was one in Utah, but it was canceled in 2023, so 2 years ago, after massive cost increases. There's been a couple that were in pre-construction that've been going on for a little bit, but their goal for those, as of this taping, is 2030. So that's already started, and they still don't think they'll have it done until 2030. So I put that kind of in line with what you're talking about on that Canadian project. There's another one that was denied by the National Commission, and they're reapplying, I guess. There's a lot to go with there, but do you think there's a real disconnect, Brian, between the public narrative as far as what people see in a headline or what have you, that SMRs are coming soon, and then that actual deployment reality?
I think there's a complete disconnect, absolutely. And I think there's lots of people who very much realize it. They've seen the writing on the wall for too long, right? They've heard the stories for too long, and then they don't see anything actually tangible happening in front of them. But it's this era where, with increased data centers and all this demand, people are looking for new options, right? And it gives developers, or maybe I should say, people looking to develop this technology, it gives them an opportunity to pitch, because when you look at a data center, like, ideally you kind of want it to be, I don't know if I want to say remote, but you kind of want it to take care of its own power, right? And solar can do that, but has intermittency issues. Natural gas is where most of the ones I see kind of landing on at some point, if they're going to generate their own energy. And the issue with that is you still have to get the gas there, right?
Yeah.
So it's either you either build in a more high value real estate area closer to a metropolis or something like that, where you can feed it, or you need something like a nuclear, like a solar, like a mix of several things to make it work. So it just feels like kind of like an idealistic answer that isn't realistic unless you're planning for 2035. And let's be honest, like, with the way they're building data centers these days, I don't think anybody's planning for 2035. They want to get these things up and running very quickly.
Yes, the time frame is so important for these data centers. I mean, they need more and more every single day, right? Yeah, there's so much more consumption. There's so much more AI, just that computing power required. is requiring a lot of electricity. And that kind of ties into the economics. So do SMRs really makes sense when you're trying to pencil these things out? So I think, let's see, first of these kind SMRs they're pretty expensive. They're around $100 a megawatt hour that they're saying. But really, what I think about, Brian, is they're 2 to 3 times the cost of utility scale clean energy projects. So solar, wind with battery storage. Um, these SMRs, they need to be produced in mass, right? So it's not just build one, right? They basically want to almost have these things kind of on the shelf, right?
Sure.
I need a 50 megawatt for this one.
Yeah.
Okay, here, and you ship it out. But there's no active production lines, right? There's no SMR plants that are being built. So I kind of go back again to VOYGR, which was a much bigger project, but it was, again, well over budget and way behind schedule. So, I mean, bottom line, when you're talking about money, because that's really what it comes down to.
Always.
Today, is there a path for SMRs to be cost competitive with renewables and storage, or is this kind of an overbuilt solution in search of a problem?
To me, what it really feels like is, like, I'm not trying to hit the chicken and the egg problem too hard here, but it feels like 5 or 6 years from now, we may have some built, some functioning that people can say, hey, these make sense. And we have a reference. And somebody can say, hey, if we can take the factory or warehouse approach of developing these at such a scale, and so I feel like somebody over a couple of years could put together a plan that could make some sense, meaning in 15 years, maybe they're the option, right? But that's 15 years from now, and we're gonna need a lot more energy 15 years from now. So maybe that makes sense then. Maybe it does. But we need a lot more energy between now and then. So it feels slightly like a distraction for those who feel like it's the only answer.
Yeah, it's kind of like they're sticking their head in the sand, and they're waving an SMR, and kind of like we talked about a couple weeks ago. Same thing with fossil fuel generation. That's not going to make it with the timelines as far as just the turbines. So I just don't see how that works. I mean, who are we talking about that are doing these? We're talking data centers, the Amazons, right? The Googles, the Metas, all of these big players. And I get it. I think there's some MOUs that have been signed with these SMR developers and these big tech companies. I even think that the DoD, the Department of Defense here in the U.S., they're supporting some projects, and I think that makes sense. But again, there's no commercial offtake contracts. It's kind of like the current climate of tariff deals. We've got tariff deals, but there's no deal. There's nothing signed. So there's nothing actually legally binding as far as the commercial offtake contracts for these SMRs either. Just exploratory agreements, frameworks, if you will. We're hearing about that. Yeah. So the momentum that we're hearing with SMRs, it's I think you hit it pretty well. Political and very speculative, more than actually project driven. So I get it. I mean, let's talk a little bit about why SMRs would make sense for these data centers, for the DoD, for certain areas of the country. That would be a great fix for a lot of the demand that we're talking about now, right? If they were actually deployable today.
Yeah. It makes, like, when you think of these big tech companies, so many of them are so invested in solar farms and wind farms for the carbon offsets, these days. And it's not to say that they don't gain anything else from it. It is an investment. It is an asset for them. But they spend a small fortune buying these projects up, or at least buying the credits for them. Right. It would take away their requirement to do that as they try to, work towards or achieve carbon neutrality for all these giant tech companies. So it might simplify things, but again, it's just so far away, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not a short-term solution for them. And when you hear a lot of those companies talk about it, they seem open to it. And I think that gives hope to SMR developers that want to see this stuff built out. It's one of those, I don't know what I'd compare it to, maybe like the nuclear bomb, but um, it's one of those where you kind of need a government to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is going to take 20 years, and we're going to do it. If you're to achieve that. I know there's people very much like the big nuclear advocates you see out there, that's what they want, right? Is they want to see government realize that this is the best path forward, because that's what they feel. It becomes an all-in approach. It's very difficult to kind of do that halfway.
Yeah.
It's hard to picture a government investing enough time and money to make that a major part of the grid 15 to 20 years ago, when all of these governments really want to just get reelected. So they're always looking for short-term solutions. Like nuclear is a hard sell politically. Well, it's a political thing. It's a hard win to achieve, but it still goes in your books as a negative for many years going forward. So it's for politicians that don't like to look 6 months ahead, let alone 20 years. It's hard to imagine, in my view.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. This isn't a short-term solution. It could be part of the long-term solution.
Yeah.
But it's the long term. It's not, like my friend mentioned, 2 years, 2027, we're going to see these things. No, and his argument was, hey, there's these Googles are speccing these in to their new builds. Wait, I mean, you can spec, Bigfoot riding a unicorn into your projects too, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen, right? There's a reality. So let's play this out a little bit. Fast forward to 2 years or even 5 years, when SMRs are not out, or maybe there's one or two, and there's kind of maybe starting a slow rollout, and they're going to have to see all the problems and take care of all those. That's just how new technology is. What's going to happen with these folks that didn't plan accordingly? What's going to happen with an Amazon or a Google that said, oh wait, I thought we were going to be able to power this with an SMR, and wait, they're not ready yet? Oh, okay. How are we going to power these things?
Yeah, I can't imagine them making an investment of that scale, assuming an SMR is going to be available in the next, I can't even, like 7 years. Like that feels like so much risk for the investment of a data center to be dependent on that. Right. Like, can you really see that? Like, these companies are so well managed. They manage risk very well, I'm sure. Other than, with our data and stuff, as we see. Um, it's just hard for me to imagine, right? Like, they're so used to like building networks and building computer programs and all of these things that it's like you need X, Y, Z to achieve. And Z in this case is, I don't want to say theoretical, but its timeline is, right?
Yeah.
Can Amazon say we need this online by 2027, but maybe the SMR will be ready by 2031, so not a big deal?
Yeah, I totally believe they're specking these in. I get that, but I mean, you and I both know construction very well. They'll have the specs, and then, or an alternative, right? And a lot of times projects that are a few years down the road, they'll spec things in initially, and they're like, all right, let's see where we're at in a year, and then we'll respec whatever, and then, kind of take it from there. Amazon, I know. I mean, we've built projects for Amazon, big roof mount solar projects. I know they're a lot smarter than that. I think Apple, they've bought into one of the nuclear plants here in the U.S. 3 Mile Island, maybe.
Sure.
Like Meta's doing that. So So they're thinking that far ahead in realistic terms is the way I take it. Feels like it's more hopeful with regards to SMRs.
Yeah, it feels like you could see some sort of microgrid strategy having a mix of different things, right? Like, no, I don't think you're going to see data centers that are 100% solar anytime soon. It just the intermittency is an issue, and I don't think we're quite ready to back that all with batteries at that level of demand. But I think you could see a mix of things. Maybe you see something that's a mix of solar and batteries and natural gas or something like that with the intention of, maybe having an SMR in 10 years. Maybe that's a plan. I'm not sure. But it's one of those things where when these are remotely located, I feel like natural gas is going to end up landing on these a lot and then being offset by another project, which isn't really what you want to see. You want to see as much green energy in there as possible. But it's hard to imagine them taking that route. It's just, I don't know. It's going to be a wait and see game to see how this goes, I guess.
Yeah, in the short term, and kind of how I'm labeling short term right now is up to 2030 in that time frame. Again, even the natural gas plants are going to be struggling just to get the steam turbines. So they can build them and they can have them ready for those to bring those steam turbines in and hook everything up. That's doable, but that's still a long time off, 5 to 7 years on that. So to me, it still is going to fall back on clean energy. And I get your point. I agree. And this was, my friend's point that takes a lot of solar to power a data center. Yeah, right. It does. And that's a lot of batteries for whenever you need that load at night or what have you. So I get it. I don't know what their alternative is though. I mean,
Yeah, I would think some sort of idealistic situation is them staying on the grid and putting as much solar or what have you on there with it. If they're going to be off grid, it's going to be more complicated, right?
yeah.
Um, it gets very complicated. It gets very expensive. I guess the other answer is how much money are you going to be spending on this data center in the first place? What is its energy needs? Like it's a very complicated calculation, obviously. I know one of the Mr. Wonderful, as he calls himself, Kevin O'Leary was the Canadian who was pitching this giant data center project. Was supposed to be the biggest in the world in Alberta, and it came out later, and it was supposed to be in this area that's fairly plentiful with natural gas, and that was supposed to run the whole thing. But it did come out later that the premier of Alberta had basically asked him to pitch this project. The local area had no concept or any idea that there was talk of development, landowners, anything. It was very much a political play that I'm sure will never happen. But Alberta has very much been pushing the concept of we want your data centers, but figure out your own energy. I mean, and they kind of say bring your own energy, which doesn't really make sense, right? Because they really want them to use local natural gas is what they're pitching, I guess.
Sure.
They want it to be in areas where there is a lot of reserves, and then they can build them there and pipe it in and take that approach. Because I mean, our local government here, as far as provincially, is not in any way inclined to move things away from natural gas. Sorry, oil and gas, I should say. That's what they're looking for everything to land on worldwide.
Yeah, because there's so much there. I get that. I guess the other, if we take a step back, right? Let's go up, around 50,000 feet and look down at this problem. So SMRs are going to be tough. Fossil fuel with steam turbine production, that's going to be tough as far as getting those online in the next 5 years. To me, the only realistic solution for this, because we know there's going to be more data centers, there's going to be more consumption. We know we've got to have more energy, right? More electricity. Right. So to me, these behind the meter projects that are on site, I'm thinking of, manufacturing facilities and warehouses, these commercial industrial type applications, the education facilities, high schools, grade schools, colleges, any electron that you can produce on site, For those types of loads, that's one less electron you need coming from the grid, and that one less electron times whatever that number is can then be redirected to these data centers, and they are
100%.
grid tied. That seems to be the way it looks in my mind of the path forward there. But I guess they have to really accept that SMRs aren't going to come online, nor will fossil fuels, unless something incredible happens.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, kind of as you're mentioning, looking for more of like a universal, holistic approach is kind of the best to advance green energy in the near and long term, right? The more solar we can put on the grid that can be shared amongst people, and we can have grid edge batteries all over the place, that's going to make the biggest difference, I think. And in so many cases, when you can kind of share that demand that's resolved with a battery, as well as balance those peaks with solar. You're starting to see it more in California after so many years of judgment on the duck curve, as they say, right? You're starting to see those batteries really start to bite into that.
Yeah.
And as they get cheaper and cheaper, suddenly I think it's going to be much like you see quite a bit in Texas. It's going to be, oh wait, this actually made sense. It took a long time, but this actually made sense. And I think, well, a lot of my solar friends wouldn't like me saying it. California's policy might not be perfect for solar these days, but it's definitely forcing a lot more batteries onto the grid to get them to that next step of a more balanced grid. And ultimately, that's what we want, right? We want a clean energy balanced grid. It can't be 100% solar with no energy backup, or we're going to have problems, right? But we want more wind in there off the coast of California. That was always talked about. It doesn't seem to be happening. It's one of those things. It's one of those things, like you say, there's so many loads out there that can be satisfied by such a high degree by solar, as we know. There's so many situations that adding a battery to can balance these scenarios. SMRs, if 10, 20 years from now, that's what we're throwing at all these data centers, then maybe that's the right answer. That's fine, right? Because I don't think neither of us are really morally opposed to nuclear in any way. If it makes sense, it makes sense. But right now, we can build things today, quickly, reasonably, on grid or off grid, with solar and batteries, quite simply.
Yeah. I mean, the advanced nuclear, that's been 5 to 10 years away for 50 years now or something, right? I mean, the challenge isn't the science or the physics of it. It's economics, regulation, the fuel supply, and public trust, because, we didn't really talk about this, but even if you can do this, how much outrages are going to be from a community? We already know what they do with wind farms and solar farms. Are they going to be okay with having a nuclear reactor, sitting there? Some might, others would not. I wouldn't want that in my backyard. So there's that piece of it too. And even best case, and tell me if you agree with this, I think if you have one or two pilot projects of these SMRs that are online by 2030, is that really even meaningful? Does that really move the needle when meanwhile the solar, wind, and batteries are just becoming better and better and better? They've got their challenges. We totally acknowledge that, but is SMRs really going to make that big of a splash if they've only got these one or two pilot projects, which I think is probably being optimistic?
To your point, I think it's unlikely, right? It feels a lot like hydrogen. It's been talked about forever, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that it can't help in any way. It's just, it's got a lot of financial flaws. It does. And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And what's really going to change that? Like I say, it feels like it would take a large country to heavily invest, right? I don't know that there's much for SMRs even in China, and they kind of build everything on that nation building approach, right?
Yeah, I've heard there's one in China, but I'd have to really research that to find out, because they're pushing so much on the renewables, and they're still building coal plants, but that's part of keeping up with all their consumption. They're really leaning hard into renewables, but I mean, so big picture, what do you see with SMRs? Where do you come down on this?
I think they have great possibility, but are unlikely to be a significant part of anything, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's where I land on this. Is they're an interesting idea, um, and I think they may have their place, whether it's in the military, industrial. I'll say data centers are part of that. Maybe some type of niche grid resilience application. But whenever we're talking today, and in this short term, at least, again, I'm saying up to 2030, they're not going to solve the energy challenges we have. They're not there. They're not even close. There's no commercial deployment. They have no supply chain, no path to cost parity compared to clean energy. They haven't built one. So to me, until there's an SMR actually out there producing electricity, it's not a solution. It's a prototype, right?
Right.
So I think getting distracted by these promises and that they're writing them in to plans for data centers, okay, but I think that's hey, look over here, when the reality says something different.
Yeah. It's hard to argue with anything you just said. Like that just feels like where it's going. It's a lot of excitement. It's a lot of money that doesn't seem to go anywhere. Right. We're going to still build nuclear, and we didn't really talk about it, but some of the challenges that have existed with nuclear are, like we've even seen in, France was kind of this icon of nuclear power and how it ran and how cheaply it ran. And then in a very short period of time, they had a bit of water scarcity and drought, which drove the prices way up, and they had to buy energy from neighboring countries. And then there was suddenly a lot of maintenance costs that creeped up, and we just kind of started to see the reality. And then some of the numbers started to come out as to how much the government was subsidizing the industry. Um,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things where I just don't think it's ever been what we thought it was. But at the same time, it can be part of the solution. SMRs just feel so far off to me.
Yeah, it's probably kind of like solar back in 1990, right? I mean, there was some promise to it, right? And
Yeah.
it did work in ways, but I mean, solar and battery storage had to get to a certain point to be commercially viable. And they've got there, and they're continuing to improve. So, maybe down the road, SMRs are the way to go. But for today, I mean, I'm like you. I don't want to get distracted by, some hype and promises. Let's focus on what we can build now, which is clean energy with batteries, smart grid systems that really do save dollars. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, Brian. We want to thank everybody for joining. If you guys found this episode helpful, thought-provoking, or refreshingly honest, hey, do us a favor, like the episode, subscribe to the Clean Energy Edge, and hit that alert bell so you don't miss anything. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.